The first word little Elsie Rourke had spoken in almost a year would be the name of the woman the whole town laughed at that morning. Clara May Bennett was on her knees outside Harlan's general store with a torn sack of flour spilling across the boardwalk like fresh snow. And not one soul in Mill Creek bent down to help her. The May wind pushed white dust against her dark skirt, into the cuffs of her sleeves, across the front of her plain calico dress. She was 31 years old, full-figured, white-faced from shame but standing inside herself like a woman who had learned long ago that pride was sometimes the only coat a poor body owned. Mrs. Beatrice Harlan stood in the doorway with her gloved hands folded over her waist. "I told you, Clara May. Credit is for respectable households, not for women who wander from kitchen to kitchen hoping someone is desperate enough to keep them." A man near the hitching rail gave a low chuckle. Two church women turned their faces away, but not before Clara saw their mouths move. Too big. Too poor. Too much trouble. Clara kept her eyes on the flour. She gathered what she could into the torn cloth, her fingers careful, because wasting food felt worse than being stared at. "I offered to work for it," she said. Her voice was soft but it did not break. "I can cook. I can bake. I can scrub floors until they shine. I only ask for flour enough to get through the week." Mrs. Harlan's smile did not warm an inch. "Then ask someone who needs feeding." That was when the wagon came too fast around the corner, wheels rattling hard over the packed dirt street, a team of bay horses blowing steam, and Nathaniel Rourke pulling them up so sharply every head turned. He was a tall rancher in a weathered black hat, his jaw rough with 2 days of beard, his coat hanging open as if he had left home in a hurry and had not remembered the cold until now. In the wagon bed sat 4 children, dusty and wide-eyed. A small boy clutched an empty lunch pail. A girl around 11 held herself stiff as fence wire. Beside them, wrapped in a faded quilt, lay a little blonde child with her eyes closed and her cheeks too pale for any mother's comfort. Nate jumped down and strode toward the store. "Mrs. Harlan, I need broth bones, cornmeal, fever tea, and whatever medicine Doc Avery left here." Mrs. Harlan looked past him toward the wagon and her expression changed just enough for Clara to notice. Not kindness. Calculation. "For Elsie." Nate's hand tightened on the reins. "Now." The storekeeper did not move. "You have 5 children half-raised and no woman in that house. Folks have been saying it cannot go on like this." "I did not come for folks." His voice was low. "I came for supplies." The little child in the wagon stirred then, not crying, not speaking, only making a faint sound that slipped through the street and found Clara where she knelt. Clara rose before she thought better of it. Flour dust fell from her skirt. She needs something warm before she needs a crowd staring at her. Nate turned. His eyes moved over Clara once, taking in the flour, the torn sack, the soft roundness town people mistook for weakness. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows hungry children." Mrs. Harlan gave a sharp breath. "Mr. Rourke, I would be careful. That woman has no references worth speaking of." Clara did not look at her. She stepped toward the wagon, slow enough not to frighten the children. The older girl blocked her way. "Do not touch my sister." Clara stopped at once. "I will not." She lifted both hands, palms open. "But if you have a cup, I can make her something warm in 10 minutes. The small boy with the lunch pail whispered, "We do not have no broth." "Jonah," the older girl warned. Clara's face softened. "Then we start with water, salt, and patience." Nate looked from Clara to Elsie, then back again, and for the first time since he had driven into town, his hard expression cracked just enough to show the fear underneath. "I need someone to feed my children," he said. "That is all." Clara held his gaze. "Then take me to your stove, Mr. Rourke." A hush fell over the boardwalk. Mrs. Harlan's mouth tightened. The church women stared. The men by the rail stopped smiling. And in the wagon, little Elsie Rourke opened her eyes. She did not look at her father. She did not look at the storekeeper. She looked straight at Clara May Bennett, at the woman covered in flour and shame, and for one quiet second, the whole town seemed to disappear around them. Nathaniel Rourke did not offer Clara May Bennett his hand when she climbed onto the wagon. He only stepped back, jaw tight, one boot braced against the wheel, as if kindness itself was a thing he did not trust in public. Clara gathered the torn sack of flour against her lap and sat on the rear bench beside the little boy with the empty lunch pail. Jonah watched her with solemn brown eyes. Across from them, the 11-year-old girl kept one arm around Elsie and stared at Clara as though she had carried trouble into the wagon instead of flour. "My name is Maddie," the girl said. "I know how to take care of my sister." Clara nodded. "Then I will not get in your way. You already are." Nate flicked the reins before Clara could answer. The wagon lurched forward, leaving Mill Creek behind in a low cloud of dust and whispers. No one called after them. No one wished them well. Clara kept her eyes on the road and her hands folded around the torn flour sack. 5 miles passed before Nate spoke. "You will have a room off the kitchen. You will cook breakfast, dinner, and supper. You will not go through my wife's things. You will not discipline my children. You will not make promises to them." His voice was steady but not cruel. That almost made it harder. "Yes, sir. And you will not try to mother them." Clara looked at Elsie, small and pale beneath the quilt, her lashes resting against her cheeks like tired wings. "No, sir. I mean it. I heard you the first time, Mr. Rourke." The oldest boy, Caleb, rode ahead on a sorrel horse, shoulders too square for 14. He glanced back once, saw Clara looking, and faced forward again. The other boy, Samuel, sat near the wagon gate, kicking his heels against the boards. "Mrs. Harlan says big women eat more than they cook." Maddie's face went hot. "Samuel." Clara turned to the boy, not angry, not smiling either. "Then you had better watch me close." Samuel blinked. "Why?" "So you can tell her exactly how wrong she was." Jonah gave the smallest laugh, then covered his mouth as if laughter was not allowed on that wagon. Nate heard it. Clara saw his shoulders change just a little, but he did not turn around. Rourke Creek Ranch appeared near sundown, tucked below a line of cottonwoods, with a barn leaning into the wind and a house that looked as if it had forgotten how to welcome anyone. The porch rail needed mending. The kitchen window was cracked in one corner. There were no flowers, no laundry moving on the line, no smell of bread, no sound of women's work, only the restless creak of a place holding itself together by habit. Nate carried Elsie inside himself. Clara followed with the flour and found the kitchen colder than the evening outside. A cast iron stove sat black and quiet. Dirty bowls crowded the dry sink. A kettle with a burned bottom waited on the floor. The table was scarred with knife marks, and one chair near the window stood empty in a way that made every child avoid looking at it. "That chair is not for you," Maddie said quickly. Clara did not ask why. "Then I will stand." Nate laid Elsie on a narrow settee near the stove and turned toward Clara. "Food first. Questions later. I will need to see the pantry." "Caleb," Nate said. The boy opened a door beside the chimney. Clara stepped inside and stopped. A little cornmeal. A scoop of beans. Salt gone hard in a crock. 2 onions soft at the center. A strip of dried beef wrapped in cloth. No fresh milk. No eggs. No broth bones. The shelves did not look poor. They looked defeated. Clara reached for the cornmeal and rubbed it between her fingers. It was not much, but it was not nothing. "Well?" Nate asked from the doorway. Clara turned, flour on her sleeve, chin lifted. "Your children are not starving tonight. I did not ask for comfort. I did not offer any." She tied on her faded apron, set the torn flour sack on the table, and began sorting what could be saved from what could not. Samuel came close, curious in spite of himself. "Can you make supper out of that?" Clara handed him a dull knife and one of the onions. "Peel this." "I do not work for cooks. Tonight you work for your stomach." Caleb made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had lived longer. Maddie crossed her arms, still guarding Elsie with her whole small body. Nate stood in the doorway like a man watching a stranger touch the last pieces of his life. Clara filled the kettle, stirred the stove awake, and fed the first flame with splinters from an old crate. The kitchen took the light slowly. The children watched it as if they had forgotten fire could mean more than heat. When the water began to tremble, Clara looked over her shoulder at Nate. "You brought me here to feed them, Mr. Rourke." His eyes moved from the thin pantry shelves to Elsie's pale face. "That is right." Clara lowered her voice. "Then let me." For a moment he said nothing. Then he stepped aside, and the kitchen belonged to her. Clara May Bennett did not make a feast that first night, because there was nothing in the Rourke pantry that would allow for such pretending. She made something better. She made the kitchen believe it had a purpose again. She shaved the dried beef thin enough to fool the broth into thinking it was rich, browned the onions until their sweetness rose through the room, stirred cornmeal into water with salt and patience, and cut the cleanest part of the rescued flour into small biscuits no bigger than a child's palm. Samuel stood beside her on a stool, peeling onions so slowly that Clara had to bite the inside of her cheek not to smile. Jonah sat on the floor near the stove, hugging his empty lunch pail and watching the pot like it might vanish if he blinked. Caleb carried in 2 armloads of wood without being asked, then pretended he had only done it because the room was cold. Maddie stayed by Elsie, stiff and watchful, one hand on the quilt as if Clara might steal the little girl just by making supper smell good. Nate stood near the back door with his hat in his hands. He had taken it off without noticing. Clara noticed, but she did not look long. Men like Nathaniel Rourke did not like being caught soft. The biscuits came out pale, uneven, and fragrant. Clara brushed flour from her hands and set the pan on the table. No one moved. The children stared as though she had placed a Christmas miracle in front of them instead of bread made from a torn sack and stubbornness. "Wash up," Nate said. His voice sounded strange in the warm kitchen. Not gentle. Not yet. But less empty. They washed in turns at the basin. Clara served the youngest first, then Elsie, then Maddie, Samuel, Caleb, and finally Nate. She took no plate for herself. Nate saw it. "You eat after? I cook first." "That is not what I asked." Clara set the ladle back in the pot. "There is enough. Then sit." Maddie's head snapped up. "Papa." Nate did not look away from Clara. "There is another chair." The empty chair by the window waited in the hush. Clara looked at it once and understood more than anyone had told her. She reached instead for a crate near the stove, turned it over, and sat there with her bowl balanced in both hands. "This suits me fine." Something in Nate's face tightened, then passed. Around the table, spoons began to move. Jonah tasted first. His eyes widened and he forgot to hide it. "Can I have more?" Maddie whispered. "Jonah manners." Clara reached for his bowl. A hungry child asking for more food is not bad manners. Samuel took a bite, chewed hard, and frowned. "It is not as good as Mrs. Avery's chicken stew." "There is no chicken in it," Clara said. "Then how come it tastes like there is?" Caleb lowered his face over his bowl, but Clara saw the corner of his mouth move. Nate ate slowly, like a man afraid the warmth would cost him something later. Maddie did not touch her food. Elsie did not either. The little girl sat with her hands hidden beneath the quilt, eyes fixed on the table, face turned away from the bowl Clara had placed near her. No one spoke about it. No one begged her. No one scolded. Clara broke one biscuit in half, set the smaller piece beside Elsie's wooden doll, and slid the bowl a few inches closer without looking directly at the child. "Food can wait," she said quietly. "It does not get its feelings hurt." Maddie stared at her. Nate stopped chewing. Elsie's lashes flickered, but her hands stayed hidden. Supper ended without thanks, which Clara had expected. She cleared the bowls, saved every scrap, banked the fire, and washed dishes until the room smelled of soap, smoke, and warm bread. One by one, the children were sent upstairs. Nate carried Elsie, though she was 6 years old and light as a bundle of laundry. Clara slept in the small room off the kitchen with her shoes beside the bed, and her apron folded under her hands. Near midnight, a floorboard whispered. Nate came down the stairs with the lantern turned low. He stopped at the kitchen doorway. In the dark near the table, Elsie Rourke stood barefoot in her nightdress, one hand holding her wooden doll, the other lifting Clara's biscuit to her mouth. Crumbs clung to her lips. The bowl beside her was empty. Nate gripped the doorframe so hard the old wood gave a soft creak, but he did not speak. Neither did Elsie. She only looked toward the little room where Clara slept, then tucked the last bite against her heart before she ate it. By morning, Clara May Bennett understood that Elsie Rourke did not live in silence because she had nothing to say. She lived there because every sound in that house had learned how to frighten her. The scrape of a chair across the floor made the child tuck her chin. The iron latch on the kitchen door made her fingers close around her wooden doll until her knuckles went white. When Samuel dropped a spoon, Elsie did not cry out, but she folded smaller beneath the quilt as if the noise had hands. Clara saw it all without staring. She moved the chairs instead of dragging them. She set cups down on folded cloth. She tapped 3 times on the pantry door before opening it, though no one was inside. At breakfast, she placed a small bowl of corn mush at the same corner of the table where Elsie had stood in the night. She did not say the child's name. She did not ask her to eat. She only said, "Warm things are here when they are wanted," and turned back to the stove. Maddie watched her with narrowed eyes. She does not like people talking around her like she is a baby. Clara stirred coffee into the pot. Then I will not talk around her. And she does not like being tricked. Neither do I. Maddie had no answer for that. Nate came in from the barn with cold on his shoulders and mud on his boots. He stopped when he saw Elsie standing near the table, not seated, not eating, but near it. That alone seemed to catch the breath in his chest. Clara handed him coffee without looking directly at his face. The back door needs grease on the hinge. He frowned. What? It cries every time the wind touches it. Samuel laughed. Doors do not cry. Clara glanced toward Elsie, who had gone very still. Some do. Nate followed her eyes and the frown left him slowly. After breakfast, Clara asked Caleb for a strip of worn cloth and a spoonful of lard. He gave both without comment, though he stood nearby pretending to stack kindling while she worked at the hinge. The door gave its usual high, lonely squeal when she opened it. Elsie appeared at the foot of the stairs, bare feet tucked beneath the hem of her dress, doll held against her chest. Clara did not turn too quickly. This old door has been complaining because no one listened to it, she said. We will see if kindness helps. She rubbed the hinge, tied the cloth tight, and opened the door again. This time it moved with only a soft breath of wood. Elsie blinked. Clara opened it once more. Quiet. A third time. Still quiet. Behind her, Nate stood in the hallway with his hat in one hand. He had come in without a sound. Clara felt him there before she saw him. That door has sounded like that for 8 months, he said. It did not need 8 months of fixing. No, Clara said. Only one person noticing. Nate looked at Elsie. The child was still watching the door. Not Clara. Not him. The door. As if one small mercy had changed the shape of the room. That afternoon, Clara made weak tea with honey scraped from the bottom of an old jar, and left it near Elsie's doll. She mended the torn sleeve of Jonah's shirt. She let Samuel stir batter until his arm got tired and he forgot to be sharp-tongued. She showed Maddie how to cut biscuit dough with the rim of a tin cup, and when Maddie pressed too hard, Clara only said, "Bread forgives a heavy hand." The words settled strangely in the girl's face. Near dusk, Elsie carried her untouched tea back to the kitchen. She did not drink it. She did not speak. She set the cup on the work table beside Clara and placed one small finger on the repaired door hinge. Then she looked up. Clara's hand stilled in the flour. "Yes," she whispered. "It is quiet now." Elsie's mouth parted. Nothing came out. Maddie appeared in the hallway, and the child closed again like a book. Nate saw it from the porch. His jaw tightened, not with anger, but with the helplessness of a father who had been trying to force open what needed shelter first. That night, when the wind rose over Rourke Creek and brushed against the back door, it did not scream. It only sighed. And for the first time since Clara had arrived, Elsie slept outside the room that had belonged to her mother, curled on the kitchen settee with her doll under one arm and Clara's folded apron tucked beneath her cheek. The next morning, the house did not wake peaceful, but it woke warmer. That was enough for Clara May Bennett. The stove took the flame on the first try. Jonah came downstairs with his shirt mended and touched the sleeve 3 times before breakfast. Samuel asked if he could stir again, though he made it sound like a chore he was willing to suffer through. Caleb brought in eggs from a neighbor's hens, traded for a half day of fence work before sunup, and set them on the table without looking proud of himself. Even Maddie came into the kitchen before she was called, her hair braided neatly, her chin lifted, her eyes going at once to the settee where Elsie still slept with Clara's folded apron beneath her cheek. That was the moment Clara saw something harden in the girl. Not anger first. Fear. Maddie crossed the room and took the apron gently from under Elsie's face. The child stirred but did not wake. "That is yours," Maddie said. Clara wiped her hands on a towel. "She only borrowed it. She has her own blanket." "Yes. She has Mama's shawl upstairs." Clara softened her voice. "I know. Maddie held the apron out like it had done something wrong. Then why does she want this? Clara did not reach for it. Maybe because it was near. Maddie's mouth trembled once, so fast a person could miss it. She forgot Mama's voice. Now she is going to forget everything else. Clara felt the words settle into the kitchen like ash. Nate stood just outside the back door, one hand on the latch, hearing enough to stop but not enough to enter. Clara kept her eyes on Maddie. No child forgets her mother because someone feeds her breakfast. You do not know that. No, Clara said. I do not. Maddie threw the apron onto the work table and walked out before tears could shame her. Clara let her go. Grief was a stubborn horse. Pull too hard, and it would break the fence before it let itself be led. By noon, the wind had shifted and brought visitors' voices up from the road. Mrs. Harlan had not come to the ranch, but her words had. A peddler left a crate of salt pork at the barn and told Caleb, loud enough for the porch to hear, that folks in Mill Creek were already wondering how long before Clara Bennett started wearing Mrs. Rourke's dresses and sitting in Mrs. Rourke's chair. Caleb told him to get back on his wagon. Maddie heard every word. Clara did not. She was in the pantry counting beans. That evening, she set a pot of stew over the stove, richer than the first meal, with onion, salt pork, and the last of the clean flour worked into dumplings. The smell filled the house. Jonah hovered near the table. Samuel washed without being told. Even Nate came in early, dust on his coat and a quiet look in his eyes when he saw Elsie sitting on the lowest stair watching Clara's hands. Then Clara lifted the spoon, tasted the broth and went still. Salt. Too much. Not an accident. Not a little. Enough to ruin every careful thing she had saved. The kitchen waited. Clara felt Maddie watching from the corner, face pale and defiant, one hand gripping the back of a chair. Samuel leaned toward the pot. Is it ready? Clara set the spoon down. Her throat worked once. Then she smiled, small and tired. Not this one. Nate looked at her. What happened? I misjudged the salt. Maddie's fingers tightened. Caleb looked from Clara to his sister. He knew. Clara saw that he knew. She shook her head once, barely at all. Do not. Nate stepped closer. You do not misjudge much. Clara lifted the heavy pot with both cloth-covered hands and carried it to the wash basin. Steam rose around her face. Even good cooks have days they need to start over. With what? Maddie asked, sharp as a thorn. Clara turned. With water, cornmeal, and patience. The same words she had brought into the house with her. Jonah's face fell, but he did not complain. Samuel kicked the chair leg, then stopped when Elsie flinched. Nate saw that too. Clara cleaned the pot, scraped what could be saved, and began again. No one spoke for a long while. The second supper was thinner, humbler but warm. Clara served everyone before herself, and when Maddie's bowl was placed before her, the girl stared into it like it might accuse her. Nate waited until the children were sent upstairs. Then he found Clara at the sink, sleeves rolled, hands red from hot water. You protected her. Clara kept washing. She is 11. She spoiled food we could not spare. She is grieving food she thinks I am stealing. Nate drew in a breath and let it out slowly. That does not make it right. No, Clara said. It makes it lonely. On the stairs, unseen by both of them, Maddie covered her mouth with both hands. Later, when the house had gone quiet and Clara opened the door to her little room, she found her torn apron folded on the bed. Beside it lay a needle, a spool of brown thread, and a crooked scrap of paper with only 2 words written in a child's careful hand. Fix it. Clara May Bennett stitched the torn apron before sunrise, not because cloth mattered so much, but because the small crooked note beside it did. Fix it. She sat at the kitchen table with the lamp turned low, pulling brown thread through faded cotton while the house slept around her. Once near the stairs, a floorboard sighed. Clara looked up and saw Maddie standing in her nightdress, arms wrapped tight around herself. The girl did not speak. Clara did not make her. She only held up the apron, showing the first careful seam. Maddie swallowed, nodded once, and went back upstairs. By breakfast, the apron was whole enough to tie around Clara's waist, though the mended place showed plainly across the front. Jonah noticed first. It has a scar, he said. Clara set a pan of Johnny cakes on the stove. Most useful things do. Maddie looked down at her plate. Nathaniel Rourke heard it from the doorway and grew very still, but he said nothing. That was becoming his way with Clara, seeing more than he named. The morning passed with work. Caleb and Samuel drove 2 milk cows down from the north pasture. Jonah carried kindling 1 stick at a time, solemn as a banker. Elsie sat on the kitchen settee with her doll and watched Clara roll dough, her silent eyes following every turn of the pin. The house had begun to breathe in small, careful ways. Then wheels sounded on the road. Not the freight wagon. Not a neighbor. A finer buggy came up the lane, black and polished, pulled by a matched pair that looked too clean for ranch dirt. Beatrice Harlan sat inside with her chin lifted, and beside her was a man Clara had hoped never to see again. Harvey Cole stepped down first, brushing dust from his sleeve as if the Rourke yard had insulted him. He was handsome in the easy way of men who practice being believed. Clara stood at the kitchen window with flour on her hands, and the warmth left her fingers. Nathaniel came from the barn, hat low, eyes narrowed. 3 ranch hands paused near the corral. Caleb stepped closer to the porch. Mrs. Harlan smiled toward the house. Nathaniel, I thought it best you knew exactly who you brought under your roof. Harvey looked past him and found Clara in the doorway. Well now. Clara May. Still hiding in kitchens. She wiped her hands slowly on the mended apron and stepped onto the porch. I am working in one. There is a difference. Samuel started forward, but Caleb caught his shoulder. Nathaniel's voice cut through the yard, low and even. State your business or turn around. Beatrice lifted a folded paper from her reticule. This came into my possession years ago. Mr. Cole thought you should understand the character of the woman feeding your children. Clara knew the paper before Harvey opened it. Her own name at the top. His writing beneath. A note he had left on the church steps the morning he ended their engagement, where half the town could find it before she did. Harvey read it aloud, savoring each word. No decent man wants a woman your size. No decent home needs that much shame at its table. The yard went silent. 1 ranch hand looked at the ground. Jonah stood in the doorway holding Elsie's doll because she had dropped it. Maddie's face had gone white. Clara stood with both hands flat against her apron, and she did not lower her head. The words hurt less than they had once. What hurt was the children hearing them. Nathaniel crossed the yard and took the paper from Harvey's hand. He read it once. Then he looked at Clara, not with pity, not with embarrassment, but with something steadier than anger. He folded the paper carefully, as if ugly things did not deserve the drama of being torn. A man who writes that to a woman, he said, has no business standing on my land. Harvey's smile thinned. You are making a mistake. I have made plenty. Nathaniel stepped between him and the porch. This is not one of them. Beatrice's eyes sharpened. Careful, Nathaniel. The note on this ranch still passes through my bank office. A widower with debts and 5 children ought to think hard before choosing pride over sense. Nathaniel did not move. Behind him, Clara felt Elsie's small fingers close around the hem of her mended apron. No voice came from the child. Not yet. But her grip was real. Harvey leaned close enough for only the porch to hear. Keep her, and Mrs. Harlan will call what you owe before the month is out. Then he turned back to the buggy, taking his polished smile with him. Dust rose as they drove away. The ranch remained silent long after the wheels disappeared. Clara finally looked down. Elsie was still holding the apron scar with one hand and her doll with the other, as if she had chosen which broken thing could stay. The trouble Harvey Cole left behind did not ride away with his buggy. It stayed in the yard after the dust settled. It sat at the supper table that night between the beans and the biscuits. It stood behind Nathaniel Rourke when he counted coins in a small tin by lamplight and found too much month at the end of them. Clara May Bennett saw the figures before he closed the lid. Not enough for winter feed. Not enough for the banknote. Not enough to fight a woman like Beatrice Harlan if she chose to press her hand hard against the throat of the ranch. Clara did not ask questions. She had lived most of her life near other people's closed doors. She knew when a silence had numbers inside it. The next morning, Nate rode out early and came back near noon with snow in the brim of his hat, though the calendar had no right to such weather. A white squall was rolling down from the ridge, fast and mean, turning the sky the color of dishwater. He found Clara in the pantry wrapping the last of the cornmeal in clean cloth to keep the damp out. "You have family anywhere?" he asked. Clara kept her hand on the shelf. "Not any that would open a door." "A church. Church doors open wider when a woman has money or a husband." Nate looked away first. That told her more than the question had. "You want me gone?" No, the word came too quick, too rough. He drew a breath and tried again. "I want you safe." Clara turned then. "Those are not the same thing, Mr. Rourke. Beatrice Harlan can ruin this place. Harvey can stir the town. If they use your name to do it, they will make you pay before they make me pay." Maddie's face changed, fear first, anger second. She turned and ran upstairs. In the kitchen, Jonah began to cry without making much sound. Samuel kicked the table leg and then stopped himself. Caleb went outside to find Nate, crested edge, Clara's mended apron balled in both hands. Snow gathered in her pale hair. Her lips were blue with cold, but her eyes were fixed on Clara as if the rest of the world had gone too loud to understand. Nathaniel Rourke swung down from his horse 10 yards back. "Elsie!" The child flinched at the fear in his voice, and the ice answered with another quiet crack. Nate froze, then at Clara's face. Her lips moved once with no sound. Clara leaned closer. "I am right here." The second time Elsie caught her hand. She held it hard. Then from that little frozen mouth, after almost a year of silence, came one word. "Clara." It was not loud. Did not need to be. Nate heard it. His face changed as if the name had struck a bell somewhere no one had touched since his wife died. His knees bent slightly, and one gloved hand covered his mouth. Clara could not answer at first. Her eyes burned, but she kept her grip steady. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart. Clara is here." Nate moved then, careful and sure, laying himself low across the snowy bank to spread his weight. Caleb appeared behind him with a rope from the saddle, breathing hard from the run. Nate took it without looking away from his daughter. "Hold her," he said to Clara, and there was no command in it now, only trust. Between Clara's pull, Nate's reach, and Caleb's steady hands, Elsie came off the creek edge and into her father's arms. Nate held her against his coat, his face buried in her snowy hair. "I am sorry," he said over and over, full words, broken breath. "I am sorry, my girl." Elsie kept one hand twisted in Clara's apron and the other in Nate's collar. Clara sat back in the snow, trembling from cold and something deeper. Nate looked at her over Elsie's head. He did not say she was only there to cook. He did not say she should leave for her own good. He only reached out and took her hand, holding it long enough for the promise to be understood. When they came back through the cottonwoods, the ranch house glowed ahead through the storm. But other shapes waited at the gate. A black buggy, 2 town wagons, Beatrice Harlan under a dark umbrella, Harvey Cole beside her with his polished boots planted in Rourke mud. Maddie stood on the porch with Jonah and Samuel behind her, her face pale but her chin high. Clara saw the crowd before Nate did. Then Beatrice's voice cut across the yard. "There she is. The woman who brought your child into danger." Nate stepped down from the saddle with Elsie in his arms. The little girl lifted her head from his shoulder and reached one cold hand back toward Clara. Nathaniel Rourke did not answer Beatrice Harlan at first. He carried Elsie across the yard through the blowing snow, past the black buggy, past Harvey Cole, past the town faces gathered at his gate as if judgment had been invited to supper. Elsie reached back for Clara May Bennett with one trembling hand, and Clara took it before she remembered who was watching. That small hand between them said more than any defense could have. Beatrice stepped forward, her umbrella tilting in the wind. "Nathaniel, think carefully. Your child was found at the creek with that woman's apron. She has unsettled this house, stirred gossip, and placed your family in danger." Harvey gave a smooth little nod. A man with debts ought not add shame to them. Clara felt the old words waiting behind his teeth. Too large. Too poor. Too unwanted. She had heard them so often they had worn paths through her, but they did not reach as deep now. Not with Elsie holding her hand. Not with Maddie on the porch clutching the mended apron Clara had left behind. Nate set Elsie down gently on the porch step, wrapped his coat tighter around her shoulders and turned. The yard quieted. Even the horses seemed to lower their heads against the wind. "You came to my gate while my child was missing," he said. Beatrice lifted her chin. "I came because this town has a right to be concerned." "No," Nate said. "You came because you thought fear would make me obedient." Harvey's smile faded. Mrs. Harlan's gloved hand tightened on the umbrella handle. "Mind your tone. The bank note on this ranch can be called." "Then call it." The words hit the yard like a dropped iron pan. Clara looked at him. Caleb stepped off the porch, tall and thin and shaking with cold, but he stood beside his father. Samuel followed, then Jonah, then Maddie with Clara's scarred apron in both hands. Nate did not raise his voice. He did not need to. This woman fed my children when pride could not. She stayed when grief made this house cruel. She noticed what I was too broken to see. She fixed a door because the sound frightened my daughter. She saved a meal I did not have the sense to provide. She protected my girl out by that creek while the rest of you stood here preparing speeches. Beatrice's face went pale with fury. She is a hired cook. Nate looked back at Clara then. His eyes were tired, reddened by snow and fear but steady. She came as one. Elsie moved from the step and pressed herself against Clara's skirt. The yard watched. The silent child lifted her face, took one hard breath and said it again, clearer this time. "Clara." Maddie covered her mouth. Caleb bowed his head. Jonah began to cry openly. Samuel wiped his face with his sleeve and pretended he had not. Nate turned back to the gate. "My daughter spoke her name. My children need her. And so do I." Harvey laughed once, but it broke in the cold. "You would choose her?" Nate stepped down from the porch until he stood between Clara and the road. "I already have." The whole ranch fell silent. Not empty silence. Not the kind that had lived in the kitchen before Clara came. This silence was full, warm beneath the snow, like bread rising under a cloth. Beatrice Harlan looked at the children, at the ranch hands gathering near the barn, at the town people who no longer seemed eager to stand with her. Then she closed her umbrella, turned sharply, and walked back to her buggy. Harvey followed because no one had asked him to stay. Spring came slowly that year, but it came. The bank did call the note, and the ranch paid it with cattle, neighbor help, and 4 months of Clara stretching flour farther than any person in Mill Creek believed possible. By April, the porch rail was mended. By May, flowers grew beneath the kitchen window. By June, Elsie spoke a little every day. Not much. Enough. She asked for honey. She called for Jonah. She told Samuel the biscuits were too brown. And one bright morning, while Clara stood at the stove with sunlight on her white sleeves and flour on her cheek, Elsie came in holding the mended apron and said, "Mama Clara, you forgot this." The room stopped. Clara turned slowly. Nate stood in the doorway with coffee in his hand, his eyes fixed on the child, then on Clara. No one corrected Elsie. No one rushed her. Clara only knelt, tied the apron around her waist and opened her arms. Elsie walked into them as if she had been walking there all along. That winter, when Nate asked Clara to stay, he did not do it with polished words. He hung a new